The real reason oil prices will explode. They told you the oil crisis was over. They told you renewable energy would save us. They told you prices would stabilize. They believe. Oil is not just a commodity, it's the lifeblood of civilization. Every plane, truck, ship, and factory depends on it. Every piece of plastic, fertilizer, and pharmaceutical comes from it. The global economy doesn't just use oil, it runs on Italiano. And right now, the world is heading toward the greatest oil crisis in history. Not because we're running out, but because the people who control it want it that way. Nobody saw it coming, but the signs are everywhere. The warnings are deafening, and the timeline is shorter than you think. This is not about supply and demand. This is about power, control, geopolitics, war. And when oil prices explode, and they will, the world, as you know it, will collapse. The 1970s, when oil became a weapon. Let's go back. October 1973. The Yom Kippur War erupts in the Middle East. Israel fights Egypt and Syria. The United States supports Israel. In response, OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, imposes an oil embargo on the U.S. and its allies. Overnight, oil prices quadruple, gas stations run dry. Lines stretch for miles. The economy grinds to a halt. Inflation skyrockets. Unemployment soars. America, the most powerful nation on earth, brought to its knees, not by military force, but by oil. The pattern is always the same. He who controls the oil controls the world. And in 1973, the world learned a lesson it has never forgotten. Oil is not just energy. It's leverage. The OPEC embargo ended, but the power dynamics shifted forever. Middle Eastern nations realized they held the ultimate trump card, and the United States, Europe, and the rest of the industrialized world became dependent on a resource they could not fully control. That dependency still exists today, and it's about to be weaponized again. The petrodollar, the real reason America invades countries. Here's what they don't teach in school. The U.S. dollar's dominance is not based on economic strength. It's based on oil. In 1974, after the oil embargo, President Richard Nixon and Secretary of State Henry Kissinger made a deal with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia would sell oil exclusively in U.S. dollars. In exchange, the U.S. would provide military protection. This agreement, the petrodollar system, changed everything. Suddenly, every nation on earth needed U.S. dollars to buy oil. To get dollars, they had to sell goods to America or hold U.S. Treasury bonds. This created endless demand for the dollar, allowing the U.S. to print money without hyperinflation. The petrodollar gave America a superpower no empire had ever possessed: the ability to export inflation. But there's a catch. The system only works if oil is sold in dollars, and that's why America goes to war. The wars you didn't understand. Think about the last 30 years. Iraq, 2000. Saddam Hussein announces he will sell oil in euros, not dollars. By 2003, the U.S. invades. Saddam is executed. Iraq returns to the Libya, 2011. Muammar Gaddafi proposes a gold-backed African currency to replace the dollar in oil trade. Not to intervene as Gaddafi is killed. Libya collapses into chaos. Iran, 2000s present. Iran opens an oil bores selling oil in currencies other than the dollar. The U.S. imposes crippling sanctions. Tensions escalate. War is always on the table. Venezuela, Lee S. present. Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro shifts oil sales toward China and Russia, bypassing the dollar. The U.S. labels Venezuela a dictatorship, imposes sanctions, and backs regime change efforts. The pattern is always the same. Challenge the petrodollar, and you become a target. This isn't about democracy. It's not about human rights. It's about control. Control of oil. Control of currency. Control of the global economy. And now, that control is slipping. The BRICS rebellion. The dollar's death sentence. Picture this. It's 2024. The BRICS nations Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa owns. They're building an alternative to the US-dominated financial system. They're creating their own currency, their own payment systems, their own trade networks, and they're bypassing the dollar. This time, it will be worse, because BRICS isn't just 5 countries anymore. Over 40 nations have expressed interest in joining. Saudi Arabia, Iran, Argentina, Egypt, the UAE together. They represent more than 45% of the global population and 35% of global GDP. If BRICS succeeds, the petrodollar dies. If the petrodollar dies, US dominance ends. If US dominance ends, the global order collapses. Russia is already selling oil to China and India in rubles and yuan. Saudi Arabia is negotiating oil sales in yuan. Iran sells oil to China outside the dollar system entirely. The walls are closing in. And when the petrodollar falls, oil prices won't just rise, they'll explode. Peak oil, the lie that became truth for decades. Analysts warned of peak oil, the idea that global oil production would hit a maximum and then decline. In the 2000s, the theory was dismissed. Fracking technology unlocked vast reserves in the US. America became the world's largest oil producer. The crisis was supposedly over, but here's the truth. Fracking was never sustainable. Shale wells deplete 60 to 70% in the first year. They require constant drilling, constant investment, constant debt. And now, the easy oil is gone. U.S. shale production is plateauing. OPEC's spare capacity is shrinking. New discoveries are at a 70-year low. Global demand is rising. Nobody saw it coming, except the oil companies did. The governments did. The billionaires did. And they're positioning for what comes next. The green energy trap. Now imagine this. Governments around the world push green energy, solar, wind, electric vehicles. They promise a future free from fossil fuels, a future of clean, renewable power. But here's what they don't tell you. Renewable energy depends on oil. Solar panels require petroleum-based materials. Wind turbines need rare earth metals mined with diesel-powered equipment. Electric vehicle batteries depend on lithium, cobalt, and nickel extracted, processed, and transported using oil. The entire green energy infrastructure is built on fossil fuels. And the transition, it's not happening fast enough. Renewables currently provide less than 15% of global energy. Fossil fuels still dominate, and even in the most optimistic scenarios, oil demand will remain high for decades. This time, it will be worse, because the world is caught in a trap. We can't transition fast enough. And we can't keep producing oil indefinitely. The result? Scarcity, chaos, skyrocketing prices, geopolitical flashpoints, where the next crisis begins. Let's look at the map. The Middle East, still the world's largest oil-producing region, still unstable. Israel versus Iran, Saudi Arabia versus Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon. One spark, and the entire region explodes. Russia, the world's second-largest oil exporter, under sanctions. Isolated from the West, selling to China and India. If Russia cuts supply to Europe, energy prices will skyrocket. The South China Sea. China claims control over shipping lanes that carry 30% of global oil trade. The U.S. contests those claims. A military confrontation could disrupt the entire global supply chain. Venezuela holds the largest proven oil reserves on Earth. But the country is in collapse. Infrastructure is crumbling. Production is a fraction of what it once was. U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, SPR, America's emergency oil stockpile. In 2022, the Biden administration drained it to historic lows. If another crisis hits, there's no cushion. Any one of these flashpoints could trigger a supply shock. And when supply shocks hit, oil prices don't rise gradually. They explode. The coming energy war. Picture this. It's 2026. Tensions between the U.S. and China escalate. A naval confrontation occurs in the South China Sea. Shipping lanes close. Oil tankers are blocked. Within days, prices double. Within weeks, they triple. Gasoline hits $10 per gallon. Diesel shortages crippled trucking. Grocery store shelves empty. Airlines cancel flights. Factories shut down. Inflation spirals out of control. Governments impose rationing. Protests erupt. Martial law is declared. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. The 1970s oil crisis caused economic collapse. The 2008 oil price spike contributed to the financial crash. The 2022 energy crisis in Europe caused widespread suffering. Next time, it will be global, and there will be no quick recovery. Conclusion. The truth: nobody wants to hear oil prices will explode. Not because of a natural disaster, not because of a random supply disruption, but because the system is designed to fail. The petrodollar is dying. BRICS is rising. Geopolitical tensions are escalating, and the world is running out of cheap oil. The elites know this. The governments know this. The oil companies know this, and they're preparing. The question is, are you?